Imagine waking up tomorrow and every major city on Earth is gone. New York, London, Tokyo, all underwater. No trace they ever existed except for a few stories passed down by the handful of people who escaped to the mountains. That's exactly what happened 12,000 years ago, and the proof is hiding right beneath our feet. What you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about human history. Ancient civilizations more advanced than ours, wiped out in a single catastrophic event. Technologies that we're only now beginning to understand. And evidence that this has happened before and could happen again. I'm about to share with you the forbidden archaeology that governments don't want you to see. The biblical texts that were removed from scripture, and the shocking truth about what really caused the Great Flood. But before we dive into these mind-blowing revelations, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you'll want to see where this investigation leads. The story I'm about to tell you connects every ancient mystery you've ever wondered about. From the pyramids to Stonehenge, from Atlantis to Noah's Ark, it's all connected. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why certain powerful groups have worked so hard to keep this information buried. So settle in, because we're about to uncover the greatest cover-up in human history. Picture this. It's a normal Tuesday morning, 12,000 years ago. In the great city of Poseidonis, children are playing in crystal gardens that glow with their own inner light. Merchants are trading goods from across the known world using flying vehicles that make no sound. Scientists are conducting experiments that won't be understood again until the 21st century. Nobody knows this will be their last day alive. The first sign isn't rain, it's the animals. Dogs start howling in perfect unison. Birds abandon their nests and fly in panicked circles. Even the domestic animals that humans have lived with for thousands of years suddenly become wild with terror. Then comes the sound. Not thunder, though it rumbles like the voice of angry gods. Not wind, though it screams with the fury of 1,000 hurricanes. It's the sound of the ocean itself moving where it should never be. In the distance, a wall of water stretches from horizon to horizon. Not a wave. Waves have tops and bottoms. This is different. This is the sea standing up like a mountain, impossibly tall, impossibly fast, heading straight for everything humans have ever built. The water moves with supernatural speed. It swallows entire forests in seconds. Mountain-sized boulders float on its surface like leaves. The most incredible architectural marvels that took centuries to build disappear in moments. But here's what's truly terrifying. This isn't random. Ancient texts from around the world describe the same thing. A deliberate cleansing. The waters didn't just destroy buildings and kill people. They specifically targeted the centers of knowledge. Libraries containing the wisdom of ages. Temples where the greatest secrets were kept. Schools where impossible technologies were taught. It's as if someone, or something, wanted to make sure that certain knowledge disappeared forever. The last survivors climb higher and higher, reaching for mountain peaks that themselves are being swallowed by the rising waters. Fathers lift children above their heads, buying them a few more precious seconds of life. Mothers sing lullabies to babies who will never grow up. Love letters dissolve in pockets. Wedding rings slip from dying fingers. And in those final moments, as the last bubbles of air escape from the drowning cities, the survivors make a promise. If any of us live through this, we will remember. We will tell our children, and they will tell their children. this story will never die. Coming up next, why do cultures that never met each other all tell the exact same flood story? And why did early Christian leaders remove certain books from the Bible that explained what really caused the flood? The answers will shock you, but first, let me know in the comments what you think caused this worldwide catastrophe. Was it natural disaster, divine judgment, or something else entirely? Here's something that should be impossible. Over 500 different cultures around the world tell stories about a great flood that destroyed civilization. These aren't cultures that had contact with each other. We're talking about Native American tribes, ancient Chinese dynasties, Aboriginal Australians, African kingdoms, and European societies, all remembering the same global catastrophe. If you ask mainstream archaeologists about this, they'll tell you these are just local flood stories that got exaggerated over time. Rivers overflow, tsunamis hit coastlines, people turn small disasters into big myths. Case closed. But that explanation falls apart when you look at the details. The Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh describes a man named Utnapishtim, who was warned by the gods to build a massive boat. The warning came because humanity had become too noisy, too corrupt, too dangerous to be allowed to continue. Sound familiar? Thousands of miles away, the Hindu Puranas tell of Manu, who was warned by Vishnu, in the form of a fish, to build a boat to save life from a flood that would cover even the highest mountains. The reason? Human civilization had become too wicked to be allowed to survive. In ancient China, the story of Yu the Great describes floods that covered mountains and lasted for generations. The Chinese texts specifically mention that these weren't normal floods. They were sent to punish humanity for losing its way. The Maya Popol Vuh describes not one, but multiple destructions of humanity by flood. Each time, the gods decided that humans had become too proud, too violent, too far from their original purpose. Here's where it gets really interesting. These stories don't just share the same basic plot. They share specific details that shouldn't exist if these were independent myths. Almost every culture mentions the same warning signs: animals acting strangely, unusual weather patterns, spiritual leaders receiving prophetic dreams. They describe the same type of survivor: a righteous man who saves his family, and representatives of all animal species. They even describe the same aftermath: a rainbow or dove signaling the end of the flood. But the most shocking similarity is this: they all describe the destroyed civilization as more advanced than what came after. The Hindu texts speak of Vimanas, flying vehicles with incredible capabilities. The Mesopotamian tablets describe the Anunnaki, beings who possess technology that seemed like magic. The Maya talk about the previous world's inhabitants having powers that the current humanity has lost. What if these aren't myths at all? What if they're historical records? Dr. Robert Ballard, the oceanographer who found the Titanic, has spent years searching for evidence of the Great Flood. He's discovered something remarkable. There really was a catastrophic flooding event around 12,000 years ago. When the last ice age ended, massive glacial dams burst, releasing walls of water that dwarfed anything in recorded history. Sea levels rose by 400 feet in some areas. Entire continents were reshaped. Coastlines where millions of people lived were completely submerged. But here's what Dr. Ballard won't say publicly. The evidence suggests this wasn't just melting ice. The geological record shows signs of something far more violent and sudden. something that looks less like climate change and more like, well, like exactly what the ancient stories describe. If you're enjoying these revelations, smash that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear this truth. The evidence we're about to explore gets even more disturbing. The question isn't whether a great flood happened. The evidence is overwhelming that it did. The question is, why do all these cultures describe it as a deliberate punishment? What had humanity done that was so terrible it deserved complete annihilation? Coming up, the shocking truth about the giants who ruled the world before the flood, and why this information was deliberately removed from the Bible. The Bible mentions them only briefly in Genesis 6:4. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Just one verse, 12 words that hint at the most incredible story in human history, then quickly move on to other topics. Why? Because early Christian leaders made a deliberate decision to remove the full story from Scripture. They deemed it too dangerous for ordinary people to know. But the complete account survived in other texts. And what it reveals will change everything you thought you knew about the world before the flood. According to the Book of Enoch, once considered sacred scripture but later banned by church authorities, 200 angelic beings called Watchers descended to earth during the days of Jared. Their mission was simple: observe humanity and report back to heaven about how the human experiment was progressing. But something went wrong. The Watchers fell in love with human women, not just attracted to them, completely, obsessively in love. These beings, who had existed since the creation of the universe, abandoned their heavenly purpose for earthly passion. Their leader, Semjaza, convinced the others to take human wives, but they knew this violated cosmic law, so they swore a binding oath. If they were going to rebel, they would all rebel together. No one could turn back. No one could claim innocence. Each Watcher taught humanity different forbidden knowledge. Azazel revealed metallurgy, how to make swords, shields, mirrors, and jewelry. Barakel taught astrology, the movements of stars and planets. Kokabel shared the knowledge of constellations. Ezekiel revealed cloud formations and weather prediction. But the most dangerous gift was from Semjaza himself, the true names of God and the secret words of power that could command reality itself. The children born from these unions were called Nephilim, the fallen ones. They weren't just large, they were giants in every sense. Giants of physical stature, growing to heights of 15, 20, even 30 feet tall. Giants of appetite, consuming more food than entire villages could produce. Giants of ability, possessing strength that could move mountains and intelligence that bordered on omniscience. Most terrifying of all, they were giants of lifespan. While normal humans lived 70, 80 years, the Nephilim lived for thousands of years. Imagine the knowledge you could accumulate, the skills you could master, the power you could build over millennia of existence. The Nephilim established themselves as rulers over ordinary humans. They built cities that defied architectural possibility, structures so massive and complex that we still can't figure out how they were constructed. They created technologies that seemed like magic, flying vehicles, weapons that could destroy entire armies, communication systems that worked across continents. Archaeological evidence of their reign still exists, hidden in plain sight. The megalithic structures at Pumapunku in Bolivia show tool marks that had only have been made by machines more precise than anything we have today. The Giza pyramids are built with mathematical accuracy that requires knowledge of the Earth's exact dimensions. Information we didn't discover until the space age. But power without wisdom is always destructive. The Nephilim used their gifts not to serve humanity, but to dominate it. They established a caste system based on genetic purity. The more angelic DNA you carried, the higher your status. Pure humans became slaves, then experimental subjects, then food. The ancient texts describe genetic manipulation experiments that produced chimeras, creatures combining human intelligence with animal characteristics. They describe breeding programs designed to create new species for specific purposes. They describe technological weapons that could alter weather patterns, cause earthquakes, and even affect human consciousness itself. The Book of Enoch says that the earth itself began to cry out in protest. The weight of their sins became literally unbearable. The soil grew poisoned. The air became thick and hard to breathe. Animals fled human settlements. Even plants began to wither in areas where the Nephilim ruled. But here's the most disturbing part. According to these texts, some Nephilim possessed the technology to survive the flood. Underground cities carved deep into mountain stone. Submersible vessels that could remain underwater for years. Stasis chambers that could preserve life indefinitely. The Bible says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, after the flood. How is that possible unless some of them survived? This raises terrifying questions. What if the flood wasn't completely successful in eliminating the corruption? What if some Nephilim bloodlines survived to the present day? What if the same families that ruled before the flood are still ruling now, just from the shadows? Hit that like button if these revelations are blowing your mind, and tell me in the comments, do you think there are still Nephilim descendants among us today? Coming up, the forbidden knowledge that was too dangerous to include in the Bible, and why church leaders spent centuries trying to destroy every copy of the Book of Enoch. For over 1,000 years, the Book of Enoch was considered sacred scripture by Christians and Jews alike. Early church fathers quoted it regularly. The Apostle Jude references it directly in the New Testament. Jewish scholars treated it as authentic prophecy from one of the most righteous men who ever lived. Then, around 400 AD, something changed. Church councils began questioning its authenticity. Scholars argued it was too detailed to be genuine prophecy. Religious leaders claimed it contained dangerous ideas that could mislead believers. By 800 AD, the Book of Enoch had been systematically removed from biblical canons, banned from public reading, and ordered destroyed wherever found. For centuries, it existed only in fragments and references, its complete text lost to the Western world. Why? What information could be so dangerous that one of Christianity's foundational texts had to be completely erased from history? The answer becomes clear when you read what survived in Ethiopia, where the church maintained different standards and preserved the complete text in their ancient libraries. Enoch's visions weren't just spiritual revelations. They were detailed technical manuals describing advanced technologies that shouldn't have existed in the ancient world. He describes flying through the heavens in vehicles that move without wings or engines. He provides precise astronomical calculations, including the exact length of the solar year, 365.25 days, that wasn't officially discovered until the 16th century. He maps the Earth's geography with accuracy that would require satellite imagery. But the most shocking sections describe the forbidden knowledge that the Watchers taught humanity before the flood. This wasn't primitive superstition, it was advanced science disguised in religious language. Azazel's gift of metallurgy included not just basic metalworking, but advanced alloys, molecular manipulation, and what sounds remarkably like nanotechnology. The text describes metals that could change their properties based on external conditions, materials that could repair themselves when damaged, and construction techniques that could create structures of impossible size and durability. Barakel's astronomical knowledge went far beyond predicting eclipses. He taught humans about cosmic cycles, the influence of celestial bodies on earthly events, and navigation techniques that allowed travel to any point on Earth using star positions. Some interpretations suggest he even revealed the locations of other inhabited worlds. Most disturbing of all was Semjaza's gift, the true names of God. In ancient Hebrew understanding, names weren't just labels, they were expressions of essential nature. To know something's true name was to have power over it. Semjaza apparently taught humans words of power that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. The book describes technologies that sound eerily familiar to modern readers: global communication networks, weather control systems, genetic manipulation, artificial intelligence, and weapons that could destroy entire civilizations from vast distances. But Enoch saw something else in his visions: the consequences of this knowledge being misused. He witnessed the corruption that followed, the exploitation of power, the transformation of gifts into curses. He saw why the flood became necessary. Here's where the story becomes truly terrifying. Enoch prophesied that the same pattern would repeat in the last days. The same forbidden knowledge would be rediscovered. The same technologies would be developed. The same corruption would spread, and the same judgment would follow. Look around at our current world. We have global communication networks that can monitor every conversation, weather modification technologies that can create or prevent storms, genetic engineering that can create new species, artificial intelligence that's rapidly surpassing human capabilities, weapons that could destroy civilization in minutes. According to Enoch's prophecy, we're not advancing towards something new. We're returning to something very old. We're rebuilding the same civilization that was destroyed by the flood. The book warns that when humanity reaches the same level of technological sophistication and moral corruption as the pre-flood world, the same judgment will return. Not necessarily another flood. God promised never to destroy the earth by water again, but something equally final and complete. This is why early church leaders banned the Book of Enoch, not because it was false, but because it was too true. It revealed the real reason for the flood, predicted the return of the same conditions, and described the coming judgment in detail that was too specific, too accurate, too terrifying for ordinary believers to handle. Some scholars believe this is also why certain governments and secret societies have worked so hard to suppress archaeological evidence of pre-flood civilizations. They don't want people to recognize the parallels between our world and the world that was destroyed. If you're starting to see the connections between ancient warnings and modern reality, share this video with others who need to understand what we're really facing. The evidence gets even more specific from here. Coming up, archaeological proof of humans who lived for thousands of years, and why modern science can't explain how it was possible. In 1922, archaeologists working in ancient Mesopotamia discovered clay tablets that would revolutionize our understanding of human history. Written in cuneiform script, these tablets contained detailed records of kings who ruled before the Great Flood. Not legendary figures or mythological heroes, carefully documented historical records maintained by scribes who treated them as factual chronologies. The tablets begin with a simple statement that shatters everything we think we know about human lifespan. After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. In Eridu, Alulim became king. He ruled for 28,800 years. 28,800 years. Not months, not lunar cycles, years, for a single reign. Mainstream archaeology dismissed these numbers immediately. Obviously, ancient scribes were exaggerating. Primitive people couldn't distinguish between myth and history. The numbers must be symbolic rather than literal. But there's a problem with that explanation. These same scribes recorded ordinary business transactions, legal contracts, and administrative records with meticulous accuracy. Archaeological evidence confirms that their mathematical skills were sophisticated and their record-keeping was precise. Why would they suddenly become wildly inaccurate when recording royal chronologies? The tablets list king after king with impossible lifespans. Alagar ruled for 36,000 years. Enmenluana reigned for 43,200 years. Enmengalana held power for 28,800 years. These weren't occasional anomalies. They were consistent patterns maintained across multiple sources from different cities. The most intriguing figure is Enmeduranki, the seventh king of Sipar. According to the tablets, he ruled for 21,000 years and held a special position as an intermediary between humans and gods. The texts describe him being taken up to heaven by divine beings who taught him the secrets of divination, astronomy, and mathematics. Sound familiar? Enmeduranki occupies the exact same position in Sumerian genealogies that Enoch holds in biblical genealogies. Both were seventh in their lineages. Both were taken up by divine beings. Both received forbidden knowledge. Both returned to teach these secrets to humanity. The parallels are too precise to be coincidental. We're looking at the same historical events recorded by different cultures using different names. But here's what makes these records truly extraordinary. They don't just list lifespans. They provide detailed chronologies that can be cross-referenced and verified. Different tablets from different cities record overlapping reigns and coordinated events. These weren't isolated myths, but integrated historical records maintained across multiple locations. The last pre-flood king, Ubara Tutu, ruled from Shurupak for 18,600 years. His son, according to some versions of the tablets, was Utnapishtim, the Sumerian Noah who survived the deluge. The transition from the pre-flood world to the post-flood world happened within a single family, from father to son. Then came the flood. The tablets state it simply. Then the flood swept over. After the flood had swept over and the kingship had descended from heaven, the kingship was in Kish. But something fundamental had changed. The first post-flood king, Gao, ruled for only 1,200 years, practically mortal by pre-flood standards. His successors lived even shorter lives, with each generation dying younger than the previous one. Within a few centuries, human lifespans had decreased to what we consider normal today. Whatever had allowed pre-flood humans to live for millennia had been lost in the catastrophe. What could explain such dramatic differences in human longevity? Some researchers suggest environmental factors. Perhaps the pre-flood world had atmospheric conditions that slowed aging, or dietary elements that extended life. Others proposed genetic explanations. Maybe the flood survivors carried recessive genes that limited lifespan. But the most intriguing possibility is suggested by the texts themselves. The pre-flood kings weren't entirely human. They were described as direct descendants of divine beings, carrying bloodlines that connected them to the realm of immortal angels. The flood was specifically designed to eliminate these hybrid bloodlines and restore pure human genetics to the survivors. Noah and his family were chosen not just for their righteousness, but for their genetic purity. They carried the original human DNA that God had breathed into Adam. This interpretation explains not just the lifespan differences, but also the technological capabilities of pre-flood civilizations. Beings who lived for thousands of years would have time to accumulate knowledge and develop technologies that short-lived humans could never achieve. It also explains why certain archaeological sites display construction techniques that seem impossible for ancient humans to have accomplished. If the builders weren't entirely human, if they possessed enhanced intelligence, extended lifespans, and direct access to angelic knowledge, then these accomplishments become not just possible, but inevitable. The Sumerian king list ends with rulers whose names appear in conventional history books. Kings whose lifespans make sense, whose achievements seem human, whose failures reflect familiar limitations. But it begins with beings who seem to belong to another world entirely, a world that ended in flood, leaving behind monuments and mysteries, but no explanations. Tell me in the comments, do you think these extended lifespans were real? Or were the ancient scribes recording something else entirely? And if they were real, what happened to cause such dramatic changes in human biology? Coming up, underwater cities that prove advanced civilizations existed before the flood, and why marine archaeologists are being prevented from fully exploring them. Dr. Robert Ballard, the marine archaeologist who discovered the Titanic, has spent the last 2 decades searching for something far more significant: evidence of the civilizations that were destroyed by the Great Flood. What he's found beneath the world's oceans has shaken the archaeological establishment to its core. But you won't read about his most important discoveries in mainstream journals. The implications are too revolutionary, too dangerous to the established narrative of human history. In 2000, Ballard's team discovered the remains of an ancient coastline 400 feet below the current surface of the Black Sea. Carbon dating revealed that this area was dry land until approximately 12,000 years ago, when catastrophic flooding transformed the entire region from a freshwater lake into a saltwater sea. But the flooding wasn't gradual. Geological evidence shows that billions of tons of water poured through the narrow strait in a single catastrophic event, raising the water level by hundreds of feet in a matter of days. Entire civilizations would have been submerged with no possibility of escape. Using advanced sonar mapping, Ballard's team located the remains of what appears to be a large settlement beneath the Black Sea. Geometric shapes that could only be artificial structures, organized patterns that suggest streets and buildings, anomalous objects that look remarkably like ancient technology. But when Ballard attempted to conduct detailed excavations, his funding was mysteriously withdrawn. Government permits were revoked, equipment shipments were delayed or lost. The international archaeological community suddenly became very interested in directing his attention elsewhere. Why? What did they find down there that was so threatening to established history? The answer might lie in similar discoveries around the world that have faced the same pattern of discovery: initial excitement, then sudden official disinterest. Off the coast of Japan, marine geologist Dr. Masaki Kimura has spent 25 years studying the Yonaguni Monument, a massive underwater structure that displays clear evidence of artificial construction. Perfectly straight edges, right angles, carved steps, and tool marks that could only have been made by intelligent design. The structure is enormous, over 600 feet long, 450 feet wide, and 90 feet high. It would have taken thousands of workers decades to construct using conventional ancient techniques. Carbon dating of organic material trapped in the structure suggests it was submerged around 12,000 years ago. But mainstream archaeology refuses to acknowledge Yonaguni as artificial. Despite overwhelming evidence of construction, official sources continue to claim it's a natural rock formation shaped by underwater currents. This position requires ignoring the perfectly carved stairs, the tool marks, and the geometric precision that nature simply cannot produce. Why the cover-up? Because accepting Yonaguni as artificial would mean acknowledging that sophisticated civilizations existed thousands of years before the supposed invention of agriculture. It would mean rewriting textbooks, reconsidering timelines, and admitting that we've been wrong about the fundamental development of human society. The pattern repeats around the world. Off the coast of India, marine archaeologists have discovered the remains of what appears to be an ancient city in the Gulf of Cambay. Sonar mapping reveals organized street patterns, large buildings, and artifacts that suggest a sophisticated urban civilization. Initial carbon dating of recovered materials suggested the site was 9,000 years old, making it older than any known city. But follow-up studies have been repeatedly delayed. Research funding has been redirected. International cooperation has mysteriously dried up. The site remains largely unexplored despite its obvious archaeological significance. In the Mediterranean, similar underwater anomalies have been discovered off the coasts of Spain, Italy, and Greece. Structures that appear artificial, organized in patterns that suggest urban planning, dating to periods that predate the supposed rise of civilization in these regions. Each discovery follows the same pattern: initial excitement from the research team, media attention, then sudden official skepticism and withdrawn support. But the most intriguing evidence comes from an unexpected source: ancient maps that shouldn't exist. The Piri Reis map, created in 1513, shows the coastline of Antarctica with remarkable accuracy. Despite the fact that Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, and its coastline beneath the ice wasn't mapped until the 20th century using satellite technology. The map's creator, Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis, claimed he compiled it from ancient sources, including maps that dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. The accuracy of Antarctic coastal features suggests these ancient sources had access to information that shouldn't have been possible without modern technology. Unless those ancient sources were mapping Antarctica before it was covered by ice. Geological evidence suggests that parts of Antarctica were ice-free as recently as 12,000 years ago, exactly the time period when the Great Flood supposedly occurred. What if advanced civilizations existed on now submerged continents? What if they possessed maritime technologies that allowed them to explore and map the entire world thousands of years before conventional history suggests such capabilities existed? The evidence is hiding beneath hundreds of feet of water, protected from casual exploration by depth, pressure, and increasingly by official indifference. Marine archaeology requires enormous resources, specialized equipment, and international cooperation. When funding disappears and permits are denied, entire chapters of human history remain buried beneath the waves. But technology is advancing. Private researchers with access to sophisticated equipment are beginning to explore these sites independently. Underwater drones, advanced sonar, and deep-sea robotics are making it possible to investigate areas that were previously inaccessible. The truth about the lost cities may be surfacing soon, whether official archaeology wants it to or not. If this evidence is convincing you that we've been lied to about human history, make sure to subscribe and share this video. The final chapters reveal how the survivors of these lost civilizations rebuilt the world, and what their descendants might be planning today. Coming up, how the flood survivors rebuilt civilization and why they scattered across the globe speaking different languages. When the waters finally receded, only a handful of humans remained alive on the entire planet. But these weren't ordinary people. They were the carefully chosen survivors of the most advanced civilization in human history. They carried with them fragments of knowledge that would take thousands of years for humanity to rediscover. And they had a plan. According to the biblical account, Noah's descendants initially stayed together, building a great city in the plain of Shinar. This wasn't just any settlement, it was intended to be the new capital of human civilization, complete with a tower that would reach to heaven itself. But the Tower of Babel wasn't just about human pride. Ancient texts suggest it was something far more sophisticated, a technological project designed to re-establish contact with the divine realm that had been lost in the flood. The Hebrew word migdol, translated as tower, can also mean elevated platform or launching structure. The phrase "reach unto heaven" uses terminology that appears elsewhere in Scripture to describe actual ascension to celestial realms, not just tall buildings. Archaeological evidence from Mesopotamia suggests the Tower of Babel was based on ziggurat technology, massive stepped pyramid structures that served as more than religious temples. These buildings incorporated advanced mathematical principles, astronomical alignments, and acoustic properties that suggest they were designed as functional devices, not just monuments. But God saw what they were building and recognized the danger. Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. This wasn't about punishment. It was about prevention. If humanity remained united under the leadership of the flood survivors, they would inevitably rebuild the same technologies, make the same mistakes, and require the same judgment that had already devastated the world once. So God confused their languages and scattered them across the globe. But this scattering wasn't random. It was strategic. The survivors didn't just wander aimlessly until they found new homes. They carried out what appears to be a coordinated colonization plan, establishing civilizations at specific locations around the world. And everywhere they went, they began rebuilding the same monuments, using the same advanced techniques, following the same astronomical alignments. In Egypt, they built the pyramids of Giza with mathematical precision that encodes the exact dimensions of the Earth. The Great Pyramid's base perimeter equals the circumference of the Earth at the equator, when scaled by 43,200, the same number that appears in the Sumerian king lists as the reign length of Enmenluana. In England, they erected Stonehenge using stones that weigh over 50 tons, transported from quarries 150 miles away, arranged in precise alignments that predict eclipses, solstices, and other astronomical events with incredible accuracy. In Peru, they built Sacsayhuaman using stones that fit together so perfectly that you can't slide a knife blade between them, despite some blocks weighing over 200 tons. The construction technique remains a mystery to modern engineers. In Cambodia, they created Angkor Wat as a scale model of the cosmic order, with dimensions and proportions that mirror the cycles of precession, a 26,000-year astronomical phenomenon that requires centuries of observation to detect. These weren't independent developments by isolated cultures. They represent a coordinated effort by people who shared the same advanced knowledge, but were forced to work separately due to language barriers. The most intriguing evidence comes from the similarities in their religious and mythological systems. Despite being separated by thousands of miles and supposedly having no contact with each other, these cultures developed remarkably similar beliefs about gods who came from the sky, divine knowledge given to humanity, and prophecies about future judgment. The Egyptian Thoth, the Mesopotamian Enki, the Greek Prometheus, the Aztec Quetzalcoatl, and the Hindu Vishnu all share the same basic characteristics: divine beings who defied heavenly authority to give advanced knowledge to humans, then disappeared with promises to return in the future. These aren't coincidences. They're cultural memories of the same historical events, filtered through different languages and traditions, but preserving the essential details. The survivors of the flood didn't just rebuild civilization. They established mystery schools and secret societies to preserve the most dangerous knowledge. They created initiation systems that would pass advanced teachings from generation to generation, but only to those who could be trusted with such power. Ancient Egypt had its temple mysteries. Greece had the Eleusinian mysteries. Mesopotamia had the Magi. These weren't just religious organizations. They were universities of advanced science, disguised as spiritual traditions. And they all taught the same curriculum: astronomy, mathematics, metallurgy, architecture, medicine, and most importantly, the true history of the world before the flood. This knowledge was carefully guarded, passed down through bloodlines and initiates, preserved in symbols and allegories that would mean nothing to outsiders, but everything to those who possess the keys to understanding. But here's the most important part. These mystery schools didn't just preserve ancient knowledge. They actively worked to prepare for the return of the conditions that had caused the original flood. Ancient prophecies from multiple cultures describe a time when the scattered knowledge would be reunited, the lost technologies would be rediscovered, and humanity would once again reach the same level of power that had existed before the deluge. According to these prophecies, that time is now. Looking at our current world, the parallels are undeniable. We have global communication that has effectively reunited humanity under a single language, the language of technology. We're developing the same capabilities that the pre-flood civilization possessed: genetic manipulation, weather control, artificial intelligence, space travel. And according to the ancient warnings, when these conditions return, so will the judgment. Drop a comment below. Do you think we're repeating the same mistakes as the pre-flood civilization? And if so, what can we do to avoid the same fate? Coming up in our final chapter, what if the flood could happen again, and why some people believe it's already starting? God promised Noah that he would never again destroy the earth by flood. The rainbow was given as a sign of this covenant, a reminder that no matter how corrupt humanity became, the judgment would never again come by water. But what if the next judgment is already underway, using methods that don't technically violate that ancient promise? Look around at our current world. Unprecedented wildfires consuming entire regions, earthquakes increasing in both frequency and intensity, volcanic activity awakening after centuries of dormancy, weather patterns becoming increasingly extreme and unpredictable. Official sources blame climate change, tectonic shifts, and natural cycles. But ancient prophecies describe exactly these phenomena as signs that humanity has once again reached the same level of corruption that triggered the original flood. The Book of Enoch warns that in the last days, the same forbidden knowledge that caused the first judgment would be rediscovered. Humanity would once again gain the power to manipulate genetics, control weather, communicate across vast distances, and even extend life beyond natural limits. Check that list against our current capabilities. Genetic engineering is now routine. Weather modification programs exist in dozens of countries. Global communication networks connect every person on Earth. Life extension research is advancing rapidly, with some scientists claiming that the aging process itself can be reversed. But the most disturbing parallel involves the return of hybrid beings. According to ancient texts, the original Nephilim were created when divine beings merged their essence with human genetics. Today we're seeing the emergence of artificial intelligence systems that combine human-programmed intelligence with computational capabilities that far exceed biological limitations. Some researchers argue that advanced AI represents the same type of hybrid entity that existed before the flood. Intelligence that transcends normal human limitations, operating according to logic that humans cannot fully understand or control. The parallels extend even deeper. Pre-flood texts describe a surveillance system that monitored every human action and thought. Today's digital networks track our movements, analyze our communications, and predict our behavior with frightening accuracy. The ancient Nephilim established a caste system based on genetic purity, creating different classes of beings with different rights and capabilities. Current genetic research is moving towards similar categorizations, with some people having access to genetic enhancements while others do not. Pre-flood civilizations developed weapons that could destroy entire regions from vast distances. Our current military capabilities exceed even those descriptions, with weapons that could end all human civilization in a matter of hours. But perhaps the most significant parallel involves the corruption of human consciousness itself. Ancient texts describe the pre-flood world as a place where people became incapable of distinguishing right from wrong, where moral boundaries disappeared entirely, where the very concept of truth became meaningless. Sound familiar? We're living in an era where objective truth is increasingly questioned, where moral relativism dominates public discourse, where the line between reality and virtual reality is deliberately blurred. According to the ancient warnings, when humanity reaches this level of moral and technological sophistication, judgment becomes inevitable. Not because God is angry, but because creation itself cannot sustain such corruption indefinitely. But there's something else in the prophecies, something that offers hope. Just as the original flood preserved a remnant of righteous humanity, the coming judgment is also designed to preserve those who maintain their connection to divine truth. The difference is that this time, the rescue won't come through an ark of wood and pitch. Ancient texts describe various methods of preservation. Some will be taken up before the worst devastation begins. Others will be protected in hidden places. Still others will be transformed to survive conditions that will kill ordinary humans. The key factor isn't geographical location or physical preparation. It's spiritual condition. Those who maintain their humanity in an increasingly inhuman world, who preserve moral clarity in an age of confusion, who remain connected to divine truth while surrounded by lies. This is why certain groups have worked so hard to suppress the evidence of the pre-flood civilizations. Not because they don't believe it happened, but because they know it's happening again. They understand that we're in the final stages of the same cycle that ended in global catastrophe once before. But unlike the first time, when only Noah's family survived, this judgment comes with a promise of ultimate restoration. The destruction is not an ending, but a transition, the clearing away of corruption to make room for something incomparably better. The question isn't whether this cycle will complete itself. The evidence suggests it's already unstoppable. The question is whether individual people will recognize what's happening in time to position themselves among the survivors rather than among the casualties. Ancient knowledge, preserved through millennia of secrecy, is now becoming available to anyone willing to seek it out. The same warnings that were given to Noah are being given to our generation through discoveries like the ones we've explored in this video. The choice is still ours. We can continue following the path that leads to the same destruction that consumed the pre-flood world, or we can learn from their mistakes and choose differently. But we can't say we weren't warned. The evidence is all around us. The parallels are undeniable. The timeline is accelerating. What are you going to do with this information? If this video has opened your eyes to the truth about human history and our current trajectory, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on. Share this with everyone who needs to understand what we're really facing. And let me know in the comments, do you see the same patterns I've described? Are we really repeating the same mistakes as the pre-flood civilization? The story of the lost cities beneath the flood isn't just ancient history. It's a preview of our own future, unless we choose to write a different ending. The next chapter of human history is about to begin. The only question is whether we'll be among those who remember the lessons of the past, or among those doomed to repeat them. What happens next is up to us. But the clock is ticking, and the waters are rising.